a really exciting time for nurseries currently, because there is a much bigger focus now, more than any time before, on how children learn how to read. And as you know, it all starts at the beginning, those crucial early years in the nursery setting. So let's get started. Rafi, sorry, trying to start my video? It says you can't because your host has stopped it.
Okay, one moment. You can start your video now.
There we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Rafi. So let's get started. So these are the things that I would like to cover this morning. We'll start off with an overview of why we want to get children excited about books, excited about reading. Then we'll go through some technical vocabulary that you need to familiarize yourself with. Then we'll look at the difference between phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. By the end of the session, you'll know exactly what those two things mean. Then we'll look at how it's delivered in the nursery, so some practical ideas for you to take away and start implementing straight away. Then I'd like to look at planning for stories, nursery rhymes, poems and songs. And finally, planning for talk. How do we enhance children's vocabulary? So if we start with the end goal in mind, so beyond nursery, if we want to get children reading, and not just the skill of reading, but we want them to love reading. So moving away from learning to read to reading to learn. And that journey starts in the nursery. So by doing these three things here. So number one, having a good plan in place for stories, for nursery rhymes, for poems and songs. Which ones are you going to share with your children? Which ones do you want them to know off by heart? Which ones do you want them to be exposed to? Having a good plan for talk. How are you going to enhance the children's vocabulary? And lastly, developing children's phonological and phonemic awareness. And we're going to look at all three of those points in more detail throughout the morning. And I've just included, if you see there, that where it's called the simple view of reading. I really like that. It's by Sir Jim Rose, because it encapsulates what reading is. If you see the two red bits, language comprehension, so what does a word mean, and word recognition, what does the word say? Those are the two things that are involved in reading. What does it mean and what does it say? And of course, we want all the children to be in that top right-hand corner. We want them to be good at recognizing words, and we want them to be good at the comprehension. But sadly, sometimes other things happen, and there are 4 possible outcomes. And sometimes, for example, the bottom right, you might get a child who can read a word off a page, but has no idea what they've just read. They can't tell you about the text. Or sometimes you get children in that top left corner, where they have very good comprehension. They can retell a story and they can say it in their own words, and they've got inference and deduction and all those sorts of skills, but they really struggle with reading a word off a page, for example. So it's looking at those 2 strands hand in hand and starting at the nursery level, how we get to develop those things. So just to start off with some vocabulary. Now, English has one of the most complicated alphabetical codes in the world. I say one of, in fact, it's arguably the most complicated alphabetical codes in the world. Linguists argue that. And that's why we start at a nursery level, not with jumping into phonics, not with jumping into the letters, but by developing their ability to hear the sounds in the English language. Now, of course, you know, in English, there are 26 letters in the alphabet. We use those 26 letters to make approximately 44 sounds. And I just want to point out a word there that I would love you to know. It's the phoneme. Phoneme means the sound. So the sound ah, the letter A makes the sound ah. We call that a phoneme. It's that smallest unit, that indivisible unit of sound in the English language. The grapheme, another important word to know, a grapheme is the written representation. So all those letters you see on the screen, they're graphemes. And in English, there are well over 150 graphemes. So a lot for children to contend with. And that's why English is one of the most complicated words, alphabetical codes. We call it an opaque alphabet system, as opposed to a transparent one. A transparent one, anyone out there who speaks, for example, Korean or Finnish, Spanish, Italian, they're quite transparent. So essentially what you say is what you write. English, sadly, is not like that. It's a lot more complicated. For example, if you compare the Spanish language, for example, there's half the number of graphemes as there are in the English language. Or if you were to compare, for example, it would take an additional up to 2 years of extra schooling for an English child to reach the same reading level of a French child, for example. So those are the discrepancies we're dealing with, and it's all because of the language, because of English. And that's why it's really important that we start in the nursery at the beginning. So it's our job to lay the foundation for successful readers. And this is where the reading journey begins, with developing phonological awareness. Phonological awareness it's an awareness that the words that we speak can be taken apart. Phonological, referring to the sound system of a language. It's something we do auditorily. So it's something we do, right? We listen to words, we listen to sentences, to rhymes, to rhythm. It's not about seeing. It's all about hearing. And a good way of remembering the difference between phonological awareness is that this is the part that can be done with your eyes shut. Children don't even need to see the letters at this stage. It's all about this and not this. So phonological awareness it's a broad term, an umbrella, if you like. And as you can see, there are 5 levels of phonological awareness. Remember, this is the part that we do with our eyes shut, because there is a distinction between phonological awareness and phonics. They're 2 very different things, and I will touch on phonics a little bit later on, but remember that phonological awareness is all about the hearing. So if we start at the beginning, number 1, rhyming and alliteration. So we start with the less complex activities. Around the age roughly of 24 months, children are beginning to join in with rhymes. They can maybe suggest a rhyme at the end of a sentence. Alliteration, of course, is having a sentence, all the words beginning with the same sound, you know, mad, monkey, made, mischief, for example. Then the second level is sentence segmentation. So breaking up a sentence into words, you can clap it out. Then number 3, syllables, segmenting and blending syllables in words. You can clap those syllables. There are 3 syllables in syllables, for example. Number 4, onset and rhyme, blending and segmenting the onset and rhyme. So if you take the word cat, k is the onset and at is the rhyme for it. And then lastly, a huge chunky area is phonemic awareness. So that's blending sounds, remember they're called phonemes, into words, and segmenting words into sounds. And I would like to please focus for a moment on those 2 words, blending and segmenting. They're quite useful to know. Blending, as it suggests, you're blending the sounds together. Cat, cat, you blend it. And segmenting is the opposite, it's reversible. You take it apart. Cat, cat, cat. You segment it. They're reversible skills. So before children can even see letters, they can begin by discriminating between the different sounds. And we start with the initial sound of a word. Then we go on to the final sound. and then lastly, the medial sound. This is quite a large area, so I just want to talk a little bit more about this, about the phonemic awareness. So it's the ability to hear, identify, and orally manipulate phonemes in words. If you take the word cake, for example, C-A-K-E, it's got 4 letters, but of course it has 3 sounds, k, a, k, k, a, k. Once the children are secure in hearing the initial sound, so in that case it's k, with practice, children will be really good at hearing the final sound. And in the case of cake, it's k, a, k, it's k again. And then you move on to hearing and identifying that medial sound. And in the case of cake, it's a. It can be quite confusing because, of course, cake has 4 letters and it ends in an E, but with practice, again, this is just about what the children can hear. And later on with phonics, you start talking about a split digraph is what that's known as. And practitioners and teachers need to be experts at pulling words apart into their constituent sounds. Remember, that's called segmenting. So practice, practice, practice with your staff, being very familiar with those 44 sounds that we spoke about, being able to pull words apart and practicing those skills with your children. In those crucial early years, we need children to have opportunities to hear and to use and to practice language in a range of ways, in a range of situations. So we start with a strong foundation, developing the children's phonological awareness. And that starts from birth, because we're talking to babies and we're singing to babies, of course. And then around 24 months, children are beginning to develop that sense of rhyme. And then roughly around 36 months, children are ready to begin to develop that phonemic awareness we spoke about. They're ready to pull words apart and put them together, back together again, orally, blending and segmenting. And then for those of you who have older children in your setting, so the children who are FS1 age, I'm going to use the UK terminology. I know different curriculums use different words, but for English curriculum, for example, if you've got children who are the FS1 age, those children in that last term, roughly, the term before they start FS2, they are now ready to enter the world of phonics. Only then are the children ready to start seeing the graphemes, remember that the written representation, because if all this foundational work has been done into the phonological awareness, it makes the job a lot easier when they start their phonics journey. And the phonics is that correspondence between letters and sounds. It's knowing how the two go together. And at the bottom of your screen there, you've got a suggested sequence. So when we start phonics, we don't start with A, B, C, D, and so on. We start with the most frequently used letters, because using those gets children decoding words quickly. And I just want to point out here that I've worked in many schools where the FS2 teachers have had a really difficult time, because when a child has come into FS2 and for one reason or another, they haven't had the opportunity to develop all of those phonemic awareness skills, and they're starting from scratch and they're starting phonics in FS2, of course, the teacher is going to get them reading. They will be successful readers eventually, but I don't think there's any teacher that would disagree that the job is made so much harder, and it's harder for the child, and it does take longer when they haven't had the time in the nursery setting to develop all of those phonological and phonemic awareness skills before they hit the ground running, ready for phonics. So if we focus now on what phonological awareness is all about, so we've spoken about what it is and why it's so important that we're starting it in the nursery setting. Now I'd like to go through the how. How do I do it in the nursery setting? How am I going to teach it? I've taken these from a document called Letters and Sounds. It's called Letters and Sounds, principles and practice high quality phonics. It's published by the Department for Education England. It was published back in 2007. It's a good introduction to phonological awareness, and it's a good introduction to phonics. If you're unfamiliar or you haven't taught it for some time, that document's a good starting point. But I will say it's very exciting. It's being updated. So there is a website you can go to and to register for the new updated version. It's certainly in need of updating. So I wouldn't rush out and go and get the current document. I would recommend waiting for the updated version. The document's divided into 6 phases. Phase 1 is all about phonological awareness, and we're going to go through it now to show you some activities. And then from phase 2 and onwards, it's all about phonics. So this phase 1, it concentrates on developing children's speaking, on developing children's listening skills, really laying the foundations for that next step, for learning the correspondence between letters and sounds. So the emphasis during this stage is to get children attuned to the sounds in their environment and for them to begin to blend and segment orally. It's split into 7 aspects. We'll run through each of those. And ultimately, the last point is that it's fun. It's meant to be fun activities that the children enjoy. So the next few slides, I'm going to share with you some videos of some practitioners implementing phase 1 in the setting. The first aspect is general sound discrimination in the environment. So this is aimed at raising children's awareness of the sounds around them and developing their listening skills. Now, hopefully, you'll be able to click out of that, and this should take you to the video and work.
And now we're going to go on a very special walk. Well done, Joshua. We're going to wear our ears, our big ears that we made yesterday. Listen. Was that a car?
Yes, that's a bee. I heard that.
You heard a...
Bunny bee.
You heard a bee? You think it might have been an ice cream van?
Yeah.
Maybe it was. We can't see it. We can only hear it, can't we? Listen again.
There's some birds. Some more birds.
I can hear some birds. There's some more birds.
I can hear some
Can you hear them?
more birds.
Are they crows? Good boy. I think they are crows.
Right, so some nice ideas there. Probably things that you already do in your setting, taking the children on for a listening walk. Maybe you drum on different items outside, on different surfaces, comparing the sounds, playing lotto games with sounds, making shakers with different types of sounds. You know, what does rice sound like compared to sand, compared to cotton, for example. So the next one is staying with general sound discrimination. This is aspect number 2, and this one is instrumental. It's all about developing the children's awareness on the various instruments and noisemakers. So let's have a look at this.
Come on, everybody, let's say hello. Say hello.
Sorry.
Some of them you may not know. Let's have a look.
Tambourine. Tambourine.
Well done. Show me how you use it. Okay, pop it in front of you. So you've got to keep your ears open. You don't know which instrument it's going to be, so you have to listen very carefully, Hugh. Sound the same? then. Yeah, he deserves a clap. Congratulations. They're the claves.
So that goes on. She plays an instrument hidden from the children, and then the children have to hear which instrument she's playing, and that child with the corresponding instrument plays theirs. And there's a whole other host of activities that you can do with instruments that they go through on that video. The third aspect is still general sound discrimination, but the body. So it's developing children's awareness with sounds, and it's all about rhythm. So getting them ready for that that segmenting of words, of sentences, of syllables. So let's have a quick look at this one.
Everyone ready for stomp? Really strong. Here we go. Stomp, stomp, stompy, stomp, 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 stompy, stomp. Yeah. Hold it up really high. That's it. And we're going to bounce it on our knee. Can you all help to do bouncing like that? And then when you get your animal, you'll be able to do your bouncing. Ready? Here we go then. Bounce the penguin, fun to do. Now it's time for something new. My turn, your turn, we can share. My turn, your turn, then it's fair. Bounce the penguin, fun to do. Then it's time for something new.
So you can see there she's starting with clapping out it's the rhythm of that sentence, but it would go on to clapping out maybe the words of the sentence, singing to the beat of the words, or eventually the syllables, bouncing the syllables to the rhyme that they sing. Next aspect is aspect number 4, and that is all to do with rhythm and rhyme. So developing their appreciation and their experiences of rhythm and rhyme in speech, something I'm sure you will do, including nursery stories and rhymes. And let's have a look at this video.
Let's see if Emily can find something for us next. It's a silly.
Sorry.
We're going to make some funny soup today. It's a silly soup. And I've got some silly things to put in our soup. And I've got this lovely wooden spoon. And we're all going to have a turn at making the soup. And we need to mix the soup. So we're going to go like this. Ugo, would you like to stir the soup first? You can stir it round and round. That's it. And I've got a funny song you can help me to sing. I'm making lots of silly soup. I'm making soup that's silly. I'm going to cook it in the fridge to make it nice and chilly. Liam, would you like to choose something to go into our soup? What are you going to have? Oh, what's that?
A bat.
A bat! Have you had bat soup before?
No.
I've never had bat soup before. I told you it was a silly soup. Right, do you want to see if you can join in the song with me? I'm making lots of silly soup. I'm making soup that's silly. I'm going to put it in the fridge to make it nice and chilly. In goes a bat. Right, Ejima, would you like to choose something to go into the bowl now, into our silly soup? Can you reach? There you go. What's that?
A rat.
A rat. So, what have we got in our soup now? We've got a rat and a bat.
They rhyme.
They do rhyme. What a clever boy.
I've played silly soup so many times. It's a good one because you can use it. It's quite a versatile game and you can use it in different ways. And as you see there, the children then go on to put in a bat and a rat and a cat and a hat. And they pull that string of rhyming words. The next aspect is number 5. That's alliteration. So remember, that's a sentence, each word beginning with the same sound. Crafty, cat, cradles the candle, for example. Let's take a look at this.
Ready? What have we got to see? Are you ready for George Bear? Doing good listening. Ready to see what's in our sound box.
I get sitting and let's close.
Ready? Oh, here it comes. Maddie, sit down then. Here it comes.
It's a snake. It's a big one.
Are you ready? It's going to come out to see you, Maddie.
Snake.
It's coming to see you, Maddie. Can you remember the sounds? Good girl. Joshua, it's coming to you. Good boy. Good boy, Zach.
No.
Pass it on.
It's very big.
Round to Jessie. That's it, Madeline. Let go so that Jessie can get it. Very good, Kelly. Well done. Let go gently so Kelly can have all of the snakes. That's it. All the way round to George Bear, Kelly. Darius. Did you look at yourself in the mirror saying that? Darius. Donut. Delicious. Delicious donut. Can you mirror? Delicious donut. Say da-da. Say oh, dibble. Very fun.
I'll stop that there. So that's nice. You see from the very beginning, when the teacher's passing around the snake, she's really drawing out the as she's passing the snake. So children really hearing that initial sound, because obviously they need to develop that skill of hearing the initial sound before they can go on to hearing it in alliteration. As you see later on in the video with the children, they look a little bit older and they're playing with the mirror and looking at their mouths as they're saying Darius and drums and so on. Two aspects left. So aspect number 6 is all about the voice sounds. So distinguishing the difference between vocal sounds, including oral blending and segmenting. Let's have a look at this one.
Right, I've brought George Bear today for our activity. Can you remember? George Bear reminds us to do...
Good sitting.
Well done, Olivia. Good sitting. With our fingers through.
And eyes looking. And good looking.
Well done. Good looking.
And lip closed.
Lips closed for good
Listening.
Well done. Right, now today we're going to have a go at doing some good talking sounds and some good listening. George Bear has brought a special box. Should we have a look? What's in his box?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a little girl.
And the man's gonna fly.
Should we have a look if George has brought the slide today, Jonathan? You're right. This is George Bear's slide, isn't it?
I think all I can outside.
There we go. Jonathan, can you remember what sound we make going down the slide?
Whee!
Very good, Jessica. Shall I have a go? Ready? Whee!
Let's just
Down to the bottom.
do it. And then Seneca time.
Would you like a turn, Jessica?
And sit up.
Ready? Ready?
Whee!
We'll have a go together. Should we use our hands? Pretend our hands. The little girl going down the slide to help us remember how to make the sound with our voice. You ready? Ready, Shay? Whee! Very good. Oh, sorry, Jessica. It's your turn to look and choose a sound.
A clock.
Oh, Jonathan, we need to do good listening to listen to the clock. Does it go tick?
Tick tock, tick tock.
Do you hear that? teacher, is it a noisy sound or a quiet sound? Quiet. So we have to be.
So that aspect is all about vocal sounds, nina, nina, wee, all of those sorts of sounds, and the teacher goes on there to distinguish between, is it a quiet sound or is it a loud sound, for example. And then the last aspect is aspect number 7. Now, this aspect is phonemic awareness. It's the oral blending and segmenting. It's one that we should spend a lot of time on. Please don't rush this part. This is where the teachers and practitioners need to be real experts on how to segment words using those pure sounds. Let's have a look at an example here.
Can you stand up and glue your feet to the floor for me? Are you ready? Glue yourself back there. Are you ready? After 3, old MacFred had a house. 1, 2, 3. Old MacFred had a house. E-I-E-I-O. And in that house he had a bag. A bag? Where do you think he takes his bag? Where do you think he wears his bag? He wears it on his back? Yeah. With a where here and a where there. Here a where, there a where, everywhere a where. Old MacFred had a house. E-I-E-I-O. And in that house he had a cup. Cup? What did he use his cup?
Now, as you can see, she goes through using the traditional Old MacDonald, but using it for what's sometimes called as robot talk, to segmenting those words and the children. Now, the children in that video have clearly had a lot of practice at that blending and segmenting. They've been doing it for some time because it takes a while for a child to hear, children, let's sit on the carpet, and then they know you are saying sit. In the beginning, they'll hear the sounds, but they won't be able to put it together, and it does take some time, but eventually they will, and they'll start putting it together and they can hear that word. So the next slide is an opportunity for you to make sure how up to speed you are with your 44 sounds. Do you know them? Are you confident in segmenting a word for a child during that phonological stage? Because it's really, really important that we're articulating them clearly and precisely. It's really important that we're not adding that you hear it, especially with parents, for example. You hear a parent saying, you know, l and m, for example. It's called a schwa, and we don't want to do that. We want to keep it pure. Ruth Miskin differentiate between the stretchy sounds and the bouncy sounds, she says. So making sure you're saying s and 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 with the short sounds, like you're not saying k, you don't have to exaggerate that at the end. It's keeping it really pure, k and t. Let's have a look together.
Synthetic phonics is a way of teaching reading. Children are taught to read letters or groups of letters by saying the sounds they represent. So they are taught that the letter M sounds like when we say it. When teaching synthetic phonics, it's really important to say the sounds correctly. You must not add an at the end of a sound. So you should say not m, and all, not la. This makes it much easier for a child to blend the sounds together to make words.
Yeah.
There are 26 letters in the alphabet, but 44 sounds in the English language. This means that some sounds are made using pairs of letters. These letter pairs are called digraphs. When 3 letters are used to make a single sound, it is known as a trigraph.
A E I O U R O Ow Oi Ear Air U A Ow I E Oi U O U U O E A E I O U R E I O U O E F U I S J A.
Once they have
So, how many of those are you familiar with? Are you confident with them? Do you know them all? Can you hear them in a sound or be able to segment any word for a child using those pure sounds? The little girl did a wonderful job of demonstrating how to use the pure sounds when we're talking about phonics. There were 2 words in that video that I would really like to focus on, please, that you can also remember, is digraph and trigraph. So that digraph, when 2 letters make one sound, like the little girl demonstrated, sh and k. And trigraph, when 3 letters make one sound, like IGH, makes one sound. So again, the key message here is really to familiarize yourself with those sounds, become experts at them. So blending and segmenting. So if I stop here for a moment, I'll stop talking for a moment and I'll just give you a chance. If you have a look at these words, now we're thinking about 2 things here. First of all, you need to become experts at knowing the sounds yourself, but also teachers who have those older children, those children who might be ready at the end of your nursery, they might be ready to start doing a little bit of phonics. Have a look at these words. Can you spot how many phonemes? Can you count how many sounds? Remember, phonemes mean sounds. How many sounds are in each of these words? I'll just give you a moment. So, hope I'm not jumping in too soon there. So if we look at shop, I'm sure you all knew shop. It has 4 letters, but it makes 3 sounds. Sh is a digraph. SH makes the sound shop, 3 sounds. Jam, j, a, m, also 3. Chin, also 3. Ch, I, n, ch is a digraph. Stop, 4 letters, 4 sounds this time. Stop. Feet, 3 sounds. F, e, t. And sink, I'm sure you all got 3 sounds again, 4 letters, but 3 sounds. S, I, nk. And ring, also 3 sounds. I, it's 3 sounds. So 3 phonemes. And remember that segmenting and blending are reversible skills, just to remember that. So here are some do's and some don'ts when we're teaching phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, and if you are moving into, if you're tipping over into phonics. So remember to always praise children for their, it's like with everything, we praise their effort, not necessarily just the result, but praise their effort in it. I find it really handy to carry, those children who are starting phonics, carry a set of cards with you at all times, because it's stealing those moments during the day when you can do a quick recap on your focus sounds, or maybe a group of letter sounds. Maybe you have children who need to be extended. What about those children who are struggling? You need to focus on them too. Practice sound talk throughout the day. So all of those things that we saw in the video, you know, can you go and find your b-a-k? Can we it on the ch air? Obviously don't overdo it, but we use it throughout the day, getting them used to hearing those sounds. Some don'ts, especially if you are tipping into the phonics now, don't use capital letters when you're teaching those graphemes. You don't need to look at the capital letters at this stage. You're just looking at lowercase letters. And one of the reasons being is because the next step is they're going to start looking at writing. You probably won't be writing in your setting. Maybe it's a very unique decision just depending on your setting. But so we focus on the lowercase letters, and also don't use the letter names. Now I'm talking specifically when we're looking at phonics. So of course you would have, and I hope you will have taught the children the letter names when you sing things like the alphabet song, A, B, C, D, E, F, those sorts of things. But when you're looking at the phoneme grapheme correspondence, when you're teaching that skill, don't use the letter A, you're talking about the sound A, because phonics is all about the phoneme match to the squiggle. Because if a child knows C-A-T, how then do they blend that into k-at? It's a big leap, if you see what I mean. So it's important that we're focusing on the sounds. Now, the next 10 slides are just some ideas. Again, so we looked at those videos for some ideas to help you with developing phonological awareness. This bit here now is if you are starting to work with some graphemes, if you're working with letters, if you have those older children. And hopefully in your material pack, you'll have lots of different ideas. These are just some that I've taken out that I know I've used, and they're fun and they're easy to prepare. So sound and water is always a good one, especially if you're teaching children, maybe you're teaching children to recognize the letters in their name, for example. So you could have their names laminated on a piece of card in a wet sound tray and getting those to mold their names out, for example. And then it says you can take a photo of the completed card and they can decorate it and you can make a display, for example. And outdoor games, always fun to take the learning outdoors. So having posts and hoops, maybe you've got some sounds attached to them and they have to throw their frisbee. You can just cut out a paper plate to make a frisbee, you don't need it. And they can, you know, gross motor skills getting in there, throwing that hoop to the poles to try and catch the sound that you call out. High five, I like this. So you just draw around their hands and have some hand templates on the wall, and they have to high five it as they're saying the sound, because that way they're blending orally the words. They're blending, you know, but for example. Fine motor skills, we're getting them to draw the letter shapes in. It could be shaving foam. That's really fun. That's my son there, actually. It was a really fun activity. We would do it in a tray of shaving foam or sand or wet sand or mud, whatever you have at hand. If you have golf balls, that's also a fun way. So they're putting the sound as they're saying the sound as they putt them again, getting them to starting to blend, sorry. And as an extension, you can start using some CVC words. That means consonant, vowel, consonant. So like the words on the list, they will all see, so is a CVC word, for example. Play-Doh buttons is a nice one as well, because because they're squashing the Play-Doh for each sound, they're really focusing, so it's discriminating on the individuality of those sounds. So, you know, d, o, g. And again, it's a nice fine motor skill there. Domino bingo, a nice fun one too, having your dominoes stacked up with the grapheme stuck on each domino, and then as they hit them over, they have to say the sound. So again, they're beginning to blend those sounds together. Hopscotch, if you've got space outside, draw a quick hopscotch with some chalk. If you know the game, you have to throw the pebble and then they have to hop to that particular, in this case, adapt it to the, you have to hop to the phoneme, to the sound, to the grapheme. This is a really nice one, the sound camera. So if your focus sound is t, for example, it's chopped off in the corner here, but that would be a letter T on just a piece of card drawn as a camera, and then scatter around the room items that begin with that initial, again, it's that initial sound, and they have to find or extend it so they find that things that don't belong to that sound. What's wrong? This is a good one for if you've got a basket full of, in this case, the picture is full of things, panda, pinecone, pen, and what's that? Oh, Peter Pan, but then put in an item that doesn't belong there. So, and see how quickly you can make it into a race. How quickly can children find the item that doesn't belong there? The imposter, the red herring, sorry, they find that quite fun. Right, so I'd now like to spend some time talking about stories and nursery rhymes and poems and songs, because if we go back to that diagram I showed you at the beginning about the simple view of reading, do you remember there were two aspects? It's what does a word say and what does a word mean? So we've looked at all the skills of how to develop children, setting them on that route to what does a word say, but now we need to look at the skill of, you know, what does it mean? And that all starts with these things, with stories and with your nursery rhymes and so on. Which stories do you read in your nursery setting? It shouldn't be something that's left to chance. It should be something that you plan. Do you plan it across the setting? Do you sit down as a team and work together and say, in this year group, we're going to do this bank of stories, and in this year group, we're doing this bank of stories, and so on. Now, I don't mean you know, at the end of the day, when we've got a spare 10 minutes and you might grab a storybook, that's different. What I'm talking about here is the planned story time that's aiding comprehension and speaking and listening. That story time, do you plan it? And also, do you plan the vocabulary that you're going to use when sharing those stories? Do you plan it as a team? You might have several classrooms in the same year group. Are you talking about what kind of vocabulary you're going to use? So which stories are you going to use? Plan the story time. Fairy tales, traditional tales, just as important because they get to reenact those. If you look at this point here, selecting second and third layer vocabulary, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide to unpick that a little bit more. And then it's all about your enthusiasm. Children love stories when we love stories. When we get really excited about a book and the way we share a book, it elicits that excitement out of the child. So how much do you enjoy phrases and explaining meanings that you found in books and doing, you know, that dramatic reconstruction? They love it. So when you're planning your story time and you're starting to think as a team before you do it, what vocabulary are we going to focus on? How are we going to enhance the children's vocabulary? One way of thinking about it is in tiers. This idea is taken from a lady called Isabel Beck. She developed the tier system of vocabulary. So that first tier are words that children already know. They're going to come into your classroom and they already know happy and they know sad and they know run and they know walk. The second tier are the synonyms. So it's that first layer but refined for particular circumstances. Now remember, you are a walking thesaurus, basically. So don't hold back. It's not, you know, a word of the week, for example. Drip feed it as much as you can, because especially at this age, they soak it up. So instead of saying happy, you know, maybe you're saying cheerful instead of saying, oh, are we feeling a bit sad? Oh, you look a little bit miserable. So getting that language out of them. And then the third layer or the third tier is words from the storybooks. So words that we wouldn't use in our everyday language, like once upon a time, but using those phrases and getting the children to recycle those phrases. And lastly, and this is a Ruth Miskin one who added this layer to the last bit, is the subject specific ones. So things like nocturnal, stegosaurus, you know, those subject specific vocabulary. So as much as we need to plan for our stories, we also need to plan for talk, for planning for how we're going to develop those children's vocabulary. One good way is giving those forced alternatives. So give a choice between words that the children then have to choose their reply. So saying things like, shall we clomp or shall we creep to the hall? Let's creep so we don't disturb anyone. And then when we get to the hall, we can clomp about. And then the children have to choose one of the two because it's a forced alternative. But it's important here that you don't use words out of context, so not completely out of context. So you wouldn't say to the children, we're going to, let's stroll to the classroom, because you're not going to stroll to the class, you stroll on the beach or you stroll in the park. So just being mindful of using words in their correct context so the children are hearing it in the correct context. And as well as forced alternative, drip feeding vocabulary throughout the day. So Mrs. Smith, you're looking very elegant in your new dress, and then you can turn to the children, can you tell Mrs. Smith, she looks so elegant, and they have to repeat after you the word elegant, for example. So you're drip feeding that vocabulary, you're getting that they're hearing it, they're using it in the correct context, and they're repeating it. And also when you're talking with them, so using, again, like a extended vocabulary, you must be exhausted from running about. So again, that second level, rather than tired, by saying exhausted. Are you feeling exhausted, or are you going to dash about again? Or at lunchtime is always a good opportunity. You know, is that pear crunchy or is it soft? Again, a forced alternative. And then lastly, plan for your open questions. Now this, depending when you're having the open and closed questions during story time, or is it during a planned talk, during an activity, think about the questions that you use with your children. And again, work with your team about thinking about the difference between open-ended questions and closed question, making sure that you know the difference between the two and how you're eliciting vocabulary out of them using those open-ended questions, for example. So if I were to say to you, would you like to go on the swings or the slide? Is that an open-ended question or a closed-ended question? Or if I was to say, you know, what's your favorite childhood memory? Is that open or closed, for example? And there's a lot more to talk about that. And we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But and the next thing I'd like to look at is talking through play. So talking before children play, talking while children are playing, talking after children play. So again, having that vocabulary ready and at hand, and it's planned, and you know which words, and all the practitioners are using the same words that you want to drip feed through their play, probably that second and third tier language. That last bit there, after play, choose one area to build upon the words, and after painting, sorry, that should mean like, so after they've created something, that's also a good opportunity to use that key vocabulary or even technical vocabulary with them. So some key things to consider. How are you currently teaching phonemic awareness in your nursery setting? Are you teaching phonological awareness in your setting? Do you have older children who are of an age who might be ready for some introduction to phonics before they're moving on to FS2? And have you spent any time discussing it? Have you observed any sessions across your setting? Have you attended any other further training in any of these areas to go into more detail? Because obviously it's a huge area, and this morning is it's an introduction to all of these areas, but there are, you know, avenues that we can go down to focus and really refine some of these skills. Have you delivered any part of the session yourself? And lastly, how confident do you feel? How confident do you feel in segmenting words? How confident do you feel in planning your story time? So the key messages that I'd like to highlight today is that phonological awareness, remember, it refers to that broad set of listening skills that we teach in the nursery level. And phonemic awareness refers to that ability to hear and manipulate those phonemes, those indivisible sounds in words. And a strong foundation in these skills will enable the children to become successful readers later on in life, later on in school, because they really are the building blocks needed before children are introduced to phonics. And remember, reading is about what the word says and what the word means. So really planning your stories, planning your poems, planning your rhymes, and your talk are all an essential part of it. And lastly, ultimately, keep it simple, keep it really simple, and keep it fun. So on the last slide here, I just had a few, these are some resources that I have, some I've used, some I've never used. I'm by no way affiliated with any of them except from my own, of course, a bunch of phonics, but just some ideas if you wanted some ideas to get you going. One of the websites I used where they were reading the sounds, that was the Oxford Owl. That's a nice one actually to give you some free resources and little snippets of videos. The first one here, Letters and Sounds, remember that's the document that was published by the Department for Education of England. It's being updated. I would wait for the new one. It's a good starting point. Avanci Phonics, you see that's me. So I'm an ECA provider as well as a trainer. So if there's anything here that we've spoken about today, again, this is real introduction. If there's anything that we'd like to develop further, particularly into the, diving deeper into phonological awareness or diving deeper into phonics, I have modules that are focused on each of those. So please feel free to contact me if you would like some further training. The only other one I'd like to point out, if you haven't seen it, I'm sure you have, at Twinkle, I use it loads. It's fantastic. It's a paid website, but it's got so many different types of resources and ideas on there, and it's a really fab website. And that brings us to the end of our workshop this morning. So I've touched a little on the theory, and I've run through some practical ideas to get you started with phonological awareness, and we touched on some practical ideas for those of you with older children who might be starting phonics. This, as I said, it's been an introduction. I hope you found it helpful, and there's some things that you can take away and get started. So finally, I'd just like to thank everyone for their time this morning. And as Rafi said, I think if there are any questions, I believe I saw some coming in, please feel free to ask me anything you like.
Thank you very much, Riri. Just to make the session a bit more interactive and to actually assist as much as we can in helping the early childhood sector, we will be having 10 minutes of quick Q&A. So if you could just type your questions in the questions section, and then Riri will try to answer as many as she can during the next 10 minutes. Now, just to give a quick roundup and with the questions we've received so far, in case people had the same question, was the certificates will be sent out on Sunday. A link to the presentation and the this recorded session will also be shared with the email that contains your certificate. The link for the videos that Riri used during the session will also be available for you to view, just to get a better understanding. And if you do need a deeper, more detailed session, please do contact us and we could arrange that for you and your nursery setting. So we are waiting for your questions. Okay, Riri, I think this one is for me. It's the assessment online. So for this session, we will not be having an online assessment. Attending the session itself is the participation that is required. Could you see the questions, Riri?
No, sorry, Rafi, I was about to say I'm clicking on Q&A, but it's not coming up.
Okay, I think it's because it's open from my end, but everybody seems to think that you have done an amazing job. People think they've learned something new, which is music to our ears. And I think that's the kind of feedback we've wanted.
Please. No, thank you, everyone. I'm so glad that it was of some use. You always want these training programs to be of some, use for you. So I'm so glad that it's been useful.
Okay, this one is for you, Riri. The question is, what's a creative way to introduce phonic awareness to ESL children?
So again, first of all, it depends on the age of those children. So just making sure that we're talking about the children who are FS1 children at the end of that academic year, so moving into term 3 before they get started. And again, it's, have they spent time, have they had enough time developing their phonological awareness? Just to touch back on that, because it's really important that they do develop those skills, even more so if they're ESL, because have been exposed to a different set of sounds entirely to English. So even more reason that we're making sure that we're really honing in on those skill set first before we get into phonics. And then when you get into phonics, for the ESL children, and equally for all children, you want to, because it's quite a big jump going from hearing that sound to seeing, seeing that this squiggle is the letter C, that represents K. And one good way we do it as adults is we use a mnemonic, for example. And there's loads of resources out there that you can buy. Ruth Miskin, in fact, she does the Read Write Ink. She has some really nice cards where you start off by drawing the picture that represents that sound. Sorry, I can't draw on here because you're not going to be able to see it. But so, for example, if I was doing, she uses, for example, Maisie Mountain. She has a girl that's called Maisie. And Maisie, I don't think you can see that. She stands next to two mountains. So I would draw it first, getting the children familiar with any mnemonic. You don't have to use Read Write Ink, any mnemonic basically to make that connection between what the sound is saying and what the grapheme is saying. And then you start to draw the grapheme to help them remember, because it is a jump. It's a squiggle essentially at the beginning. So mnemonics is a really good way. Some people don't do it with the visual mnemonic. They might do it with a body mnemonic, like Jolly Phonics. They use the actions, for example. It's also a good way. But just also bearing in mind with those ESL children that, if they don't know, if you're saying slither down a snake and they don't know what a snake is because they only know it in their first language, then of course you've got to take a step back, because you have to focus on that the vocabulary level with them first as well.
Thank you, Riri. In regards to, we have a question from Faiza, and she's asking where she can get the updated book, Letter and Sound.
That is, gosh, is there some way that I can post that somewhere later? Because there is a website that you can go to and you can register. In fact, hang on, I might have it here. You can register on a website and they'll email you with the updated version. I'll need to dig it out because I can't remember off the top of my head. Sorry, the name of the website.
Sure. I think if you can send it today or tomorrow, I'll add it to the email that we're sending the certificates to everyone so that it can be sent out.
Perfect. I'll do it straight after this. Yeah, it's yeah, and we can. Not a problem.
Okay. Another question we have is there any particular sites where people can look up for children aged 2 to 3-year-old for phonic awareness, or is the sites that you provide in the presentation good enough and covers that age range?
For 2 to 3-year-olds?
Yes.
Any websites? The videos I showed you, they were developed from that document Department for Education, and it was back in, some of those videos are from as back as 2013. I haven't come across any updated ones so far. I bet you with this new document that there will be. For a bank of ideas for age-related, Twinkle, for example, have a good phonics program where you can go into their age-specific areas, and they've got a huge range for phonological awareness. They call it phase 1. They use a traditional DFE language. So in there, if you see phase 1, that is phonological awareness in the Twinkle website, and then they do differentiate between the ages. It's quite a good one. I can't think of any websites that focus primarily on that age. Yeah, I would go to Twinkle first, and also go to Oxford Owl. They're quite a good resource as well.
Okay, the last couple of questions for the day, Riri. For children with English as a second language, will these resources help them as well, or is there something maybe a little different?
For children, I think the visual representation is really important for children with English as an additional language, and it's making sure that you're working at their pace, because again, it depends on where they are with their English acquisition. So again, if they don't have the nouns, if they don't have the names for things, it's a huge leap for them to then be segmenting words if they don't know what the word is in the first place. So I would say that all of this is definitely useful for your EAL children, your ESL children, but you have to really think about their pace and their progression. So making sure that you're moving at the right pace for them, and making sure that you're doing a lot of work around the languages and really enriching the storytelling, the rhymes, the poems, all of that's. It's essential for any child, but it's even more so for those ESL children, because you really want to immerse them into the language. And I think that's a key point with many children. So, if you think about, some children are going to come into your setting and they would have had story time every single night from day one, from when they were a baby. They've been hearing language and patterns and rhythm and rhyme in languages. They're being spoken to, and they've got books all around them. They're going to come in at a stronger point. But of course, you'll have children who haven't, for one reason or another, they just haven't had any stories, and they haven't had any time for poems of not being read to them, and they're not learning nursery rhymes. Or they do have, then they're coming in with English as an additional language, and they're starting really right at the beginning. That's when we have to plug the gap. So we want to get those children up to speed with the children who've come in with all that wonderful experience, and we need to plug the gap between the two. So it's really about immersion of the stories, of role play, lots of role play with them into the different stories. Get them to know the story off by heart, that they can recite it, they can say it, and they know the key words in them, and they get really excited about it. Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Okay, I did say a couple of questions, but there's two very interesting ones that I think that we could answer. One of them is from Miriam, and she's asking how to introduce sounds to children with determination and special needs. Do you have any ideas?
Again, it's a good question. It's a broad question at the same time, because it depends on, it comes down to the child. And I think when we talk about children of determination, I also think of them as, ultimately, whether they're children of determination or not, you're thinking about the child's starting point. And this is with any child, and particularly with children of determination, or your ESL children, sorry. You're always thinking about a child's starting point. Where are they now, and where do I want to get them, and where can I get them? Because it's all about progress. When KHDA, Ministry of Education, Ofsted, whoever, they always focus on the progress that a child has made. So it's not about attainment. It's not about them getting to a certain level, but how much progress have they made? So, and that's particularly true also of children of determination, because you could be talking about children with Down syndrome. In Down syndrome, there's a huge scale of different levels of Down syndrome, for example. Or you could have a child who is ADHD, for example, or a child who is autistic. It's such a huge umbrella. So there isn't, what I'm trying to say is there isn't one answer to that, because they are unique children with individual needs. And what I would 100% say is think about the individual child and where they are starting, their starting points.
Okay. Maybe we could have another session, a more deep dive into different, to be able to help people or teachers who are assisting the children with determination.
Yeah, it's a really interesting area, and it's really broad, as you say, because there are so many different strategies to tackle on there, definitely.
Okay, we have a final question, and that is from Tracy. She's asking, how long should we spend on segmenting and blending CVC words? When should we start introducing tricky words? She's a teacher for FS2 and Year 1.
I thought it was all nursery style. That's nice to know that someone from the older years have come in. So if you're doing oral, sorry, it was oral blending and segmenting and then tricky words.
Yes.
So with oral blending and segmenting, they should be doing it from nursery. So in FS1, they should be having a lot of practice in that oral blending and segmenting, I hope, so that when they're coming into FS2, that they're quite strong at that, so that they've started, tricky word, so that they've started phonics at the beginning of FS2 from term 1. Still carrying on with oral blending and segmenting, it's still a valuable skill to continue teaching alongside with teaching the phonics. And then once they've got a bank of sounds under their belt, so I would say at least if they have if you're familiar with the phase 2 bank, if they've got that under their belt, then they're certainly ready to start tackling some tricky words. And I would be feeding those tricky words within the week. So for example, after they've got those sounds that I had at the bottom of the screen, for example, if we're there and we're because now you're doing decoding and encoding. If you're there with your children decoding and encoding, then definitely I would start using their tricky words, because if you're year 1 as well, you've got the year 1 common exception words that that they need to be under their belt as well by the end of the year.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Riri. And thank you everyone for joining our session. Just a couple of things before we go. We do have other sessions, and if you have not booked to attend them, I'd recommend that you go back to our website and book the other sessions. They're all as interesting. We may not have the amazing Riri for the other sessions, but I promise you our other trainers are just as good. I did have one small favor to ask everyone, and that will help us then provide more free trainings like this. With the email that contains the certificate, we'll also be sending a link for an evaluation of how you felt about the topic before and after the course. And your honest opinion would be very much appreciated. That concludes our session for today. Thank you very much for attending. I hope you were able to answer as many questions as we could. And if there's anything else, please email us at support@kindery.ae, and we'll try to assist you as much as we can. Thank you very much and hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.